Welcome to Woman's Secret Signals, the channel where we decode what women never say out loud, but always show through their behavior. Most men are taught to listen to words, but attraction doesn't start with words. It starts with signals. A glance that lasts half a second too long. A change in tone she doesn't even notice. A sudden distance, or unexpected attention. These aren't random. They are patterns. And once you understand them, you stop guessing and start seeing the real psychology behind attraction, interest, and choice. Here, we break down female behavior, emotional triggers, and hidden relationship dynamics in a way most people never talk about honestly. If you've ever felt confused about what a woman really feels, you're in the right place. Because once you learn to read the signals, you don't chase answers anymore. You already know them. Most men think women choose based on looks, money, or confidence alone. But the truth is far more complex and far more psychological. Because when a woman meets a man for the first time, she is not choosing in the way most people assume. She is observing, filtering, and emotionally scanning for signals that happen within seconds. Before a conversation even becomes meaningful, her brain is already asking silent questions. Is this man safe? Is he stable? Is he interesting? Does he stand out from the crowd or blend into it? And here is what most men never realize. Women don't select men in one moment. They select them in layers. At the surface level, yes, appearance matters. Grooming, posture, eye contact, and how a man carries himself create the first impression. But this is only the entry point. What truly decides attraction happens deeper, in what psychologists often call behavioral signals and emotional impact. A man can be physically attractive and still be ignored if his presence feels uncertain, needy, or socially low value. On the other hand, a man who is not traditionally perfect looking can still stand out if he shows calm confidence, emotional control, and a sense of direction in life. This is where most misunderstandings begin. Men often try to win attraction by doing more, talking more, proving more, impressing more. But female psychology doesn't respond strongly to effort alone. It responds to energy, consistency, and perceived value under pressure. In simple terms, women don't just ask, "What does this man have?" They also ask, "How does this man behave when he is not trying to impress me?" That's the difference, because in real life, attraction is not built like a checklist. It is built like a feeling, a sense, a pattern recognition system in the brain that says, "This feels different. This feels worth noticing." And once that feeling is triggered, everything else becomes secondary. Before a woman ever develops emotional attraction, there is a silent filtering process happening in the background. Most men never notice it because it doesn't look like judgment on the surface. It looks like normal interaction. But psychologically, it's a rapid evaluation of social value signals. And here's the key truth. Women don't only assess a man individually, they assess him in relation to the environment around him, how other people respond to him, how he carries himself in social space, whether he looks comfortable being observed, whether he seems respected, ignored, or unnoticed. This is what many people call status perception, but it's not just about money or job titles. It's about how a man's presence lands in the real world. For example, a man who walks into a room quietly but confidently, makes natural eye contact, and doesn't overcompensate will often stand out more than a man who tries too hard to be noticed. Why? Because effort that feels forced can signal insecurity, while calm presence signals internal stability. Women are highly sensitive to this contrast. Another major factor is energy consistency. A man who is overly reactive, laughing too hard, trying too quickly, agreeing too easily, can unconsciously signal low boundaries. Meanwhile, a man who remains steady, grounded, and slightly unpredictable in a controlled way creates curiosity. And curiosity is the beginning of attraction. But here's where most men misunderstand this process. It is not about acting dominant or pretending to be someone you are not. In fact, fake confidence is often worse than no confidence at all. Women are extremely skilled at detecting inconsistency between behavior and emotional state. What actually matters is alignment, how your words, tone, body language, and decisions match your internal state. If a man appears comfortable in his own space, doesn't seek validation through every sentence, and doesn't rush to impress, he automatically moves higher in perceived value without saying much at all. This is why some men get attention without trying, while others try everything and still feel invisible. Because attraction often starts in silence, not conversation. Once a man passes the first filter of presence and social value, something more subtle begins to matter: emotional stimulation. This is where attraction either starts to grow or quietly disappears without explanation. Because women don't stay interested in men who are only logically acceptable. They stay interested in men who create a feeling shift inside them. And this is where most men get it wrong again. They assume attraction is built by being nice, available, and consistent in a predictable way. But predictability alone does not create emotional pull. It creates comfort. And comfort without depth quickly turns into boredom. What actually builds curiosity is emotional contrast. For example, a man who is calm but playful, a man who is kind but not overly available, a man who listens deeply but doesn't reveal everything about himself at once. This mix creates what psychology calls intrigue loops, moments where the brain keeps trying to figure someone out. And when the mind is engaged in figuring someone out, emotional attachment begins forming naturally. Another powerful trigger is emotional independence. When a woman senses that a man is emotionally stable on his own, meaning his mood, decisions, and sense of worth are not dependent on her response, it creates a strong psychological signal of strength. Not dominance in a loud way, but internal control. This is extremely important because many men unknowingly switch into approval-seeking mode when they like someone. They become more agreeable, more available, and more predictable. But instead of increasing attraction, this often reduces it, because the emotional tension disappears. Attraction needs a certain level of tension, not conflict, but space. Space for curiosity, space for imagination, space for the woman to think, "I wonder what he is really like when I know him better." And that curiosity is powerful because it is not forced, it is self-generated. Another key emotional trigger is selective attention. When a man does not treat every interaction as special, but instead shows that his attention is intentional and not freely given to everyone, it increases perceived value. Because attention, when rare and meaningful, becomes emotionally charged. In simple terms, women don't fall for constant access. They are drawn to controlled emotional availability combined with genuine depth. Once curiosity and emotional pull are activated, the dynamic shifts again. At this stage, many men think they are in, but psychologically, this is where real evaluation actually intensifies. Because attraction is not just about feeling, it's about validation through behavior over time. And women often use subtle, indirect tests to understand who a man really is beneath his best moments. These are not formal tests or manipulative games in the dramatic sense people online often exaggerate. Instead, they are natural psychological checks the mind uses to reduce uncertainty. One of the most common forms is boundary observation. For example, how does a man react when plans change suddenly? Does he stay calm or become emotionally reactive? Does he adjust easily or start seeking reassurance? Another form is consistency checking. A woman may observe whether a man's behavior stays stable across different situations: when he is busy, when he is relaxed, when he is under pressure, or when he is not getting immediate attention. Inconsistency creates doubt. Stability creates trust, and trust is a major gateway to deeper attraction. There is also something called emotional responsiveness testing. This is where a woman may share something small or emotionally neutral, not to get a solution, but to see how the man responds. Does he listen properly? Does he dismiss it? Does he overreact? Or does he respond with calm awareness? These micro reactions matter more than men realize because women are not just listening to words, they are reading patterns. Another key point in this phase is self control observation. A man who can handle disagreement without becoming defensive, who doesn't panic when attention shifts slightly, and who doesn't chase validation when uncertain, automatically signals emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is one of the strongest long term attraction anchors. But here's the deeper truth: if a man passes these tests, it doesn't instantly create love. It creates trust in his emotional stability. And that trust becomes the foundation for deeper bonding. However, if a man reacts with insecurity, over explains himself, or tries to win every situation emotionally, attraction often drops quietly, even if nothing is said directly. Because women don't decide based on single moments. They decide based on patterns of behavior under different emotional conditions. After attraction, curiosity, and trust are established, something deeper begins to form: long-term selection psychology. This is the stage most men misunderstand the most because they assume attraction automatically turns into commitment. It doesn't. At this point, a woman is no longer just asking, "Do I like this man?" She is asking something much more serious. Can this man fit into my emotional and life stability long term? And the answer is rarely based on one factor. It is based on integration, how a man fits into her emotional world, not just her excitement. One of the strongest deciding factors is emotional safety. This doesn't mean a man is predictable or boring. It means she feels secure around his reactions, his communication, and his ability to handle stress without creating chaos. A man who remains grounded during misunderstandings becomes far more valuable over time than a man who is only exciting but unstable. Another major factor is life direction. Women naturally assess whether a man is moving forward in life or standing still. It's not always about wealth or status, it's about momentum. A man with direction creates a sense of future possibility, while a man without direction creates uncertainty. Then comes something more subtle: emotional experience consistency. Short term attraction can be created by excitement, novelty, or strong chemistry. But long term selection depends on how consistently a man makes her feel respected, understood, and emotionally balanced over time. If the emotional experience is too chaotic, high highs and low lows, it becomes exhausting rather than attractive. There is also the element of identity compatibility. A woman begins to subconsciously ask, does this relationship align with who I am becoming? If being with a man enhances her self-respect, emotional stability, and sense of growth, the bond strengthens naturally. If it creates confusion or emotional strain, attraction slowly fades. And finally, the most overlooked truth: women choose men who feel reliable in uncertainty. Life is unpredictable, and so the mind looks for partners who remain stable even when conditions are not perfect. That reliability becomes more powerful than temporary excitement. So, in the end, selection is not about one trait. It is about a combination of emotional safety, direction, consistency, and inner stability. This is why some men are remembered deeply, even without doing anything extreme, and why others are forgotten, even after strong initial attraction. Because real selection is not based on the loudest impression, it is based on the most consistent emotional experience over time.